My YouTube feed is full of creators milking the female Custodes controversy, and I've noticed that most of these people don't exactly have a strong grasp of 40k lore. There's a lot of misinformation and rage baiting going on because people are dogpiling on this quote-unquote culture war, even if they have never touched the minis or books before. Giving your take on something is fine. You don't need to be a 40k fan to give a good reasonable opinion. But when you put up brain dead titles like Warhammer is dead, bruh, you tripping. It's easy to tell the difference in quality of opinion from the real ones who have dedicated at least some time to research and the clowns who are just hopping on the bandwagon for content. As someone who's actually a fan of the Golden Boys and has devoured books like The Watchers of the Throne, Cypher Lord of the Fallen, The First Heretic, Auric Gods and the Gate of Bones, I'm gonna give my take on what's happened from a strictly lore-based perspective. Let's start by making it clear Custodians are not Space Marines. I know it's an easy comparison to make for a large mainstream audience to understand, so I don't blame people for making it, but they're literally a different breed of transhuman. I could spend literally hours rambling on about the differences between the two. To put it simply, the way Custodians are created is not the same way Space Marines, aka Astartes, are created. The reason why Space Marines cannot be female lore-wise is because the gene seed, you can think of it as a genetic implant that is responsible for creating Space Marines, only works with male bodies. This is probably because gene seeds come from Primarchs and all the Primarchs are male. Malkador once told the Emperor to make the Primarchs female, but that's besides the point. Space Marines will genetically resemble the Primarchs in some way, commonly seen with their facial features and personalities. For non-40k fans, you could think of it roughly like the clones in Star Wars having vague resemblances to Jango Fett, but they all possess their own unique individual differences. That's why Space Marines call themselves the sons of their respective Primarchs. Custodians, however, are not made from gene seed. The only people who know how they are made are specialist experts like the Chirurgeons and bio-alchemists of the Imperial household and the Custodians themselves. Technically, the Emperor also knows, but it's not exactly active in their creation anymore, being strapped to the Golden Throne of Torture. All we know is that while Space Marine aspirants are taking as adolescent boys and teens, the Custodians take infants and the process is done on a cellular level. It's stated that young male infants from the noble houses of Terra were the ones chosen for this creation process. However, it's never stated that the process is restricted to males. So it's plausible to think that the Adeptus Custodes wouldn't restrict the recruitment pool post Siege of Terra. Also, if you thought becoming a Space Marine was hard, then becoming a Custodian is even harder. There's a reason why not a single Custodian has ever turned traitor, and no, that scene in the Vengeful Spirit does not count because they didn't consciously choose to do it. I'd imagine there's a reason for why the Emperor picked sons instead of daughters for his Custodes. Yet, because the creation process is mysterious, it is plausible for goated Black Library writers to work their creativity and pump out a story about the first female Custodian. Whether you think female Custodians should be a thing or not is something that goes beyond the lore, which you can watch others discuss in their videos. I do think a story like that would be a guaranteed banger. That should have been the approach to doing something like this, because you have an entire roster of amazing authors, animators, and voice actors, so how about making use of their talents? Great storytelling has always been the best showcase of 40k lore, but there's the problem. Instead of building upon what's already been written as a foundation, a decision was made to just quietly change a he to a she in the recent Codex, which is a rulebook that includes lore for the tabletop game. At least the new generation Primaris Marines were built upon the original generation of Firstborn Space Marines. They didn't just pop out of a random warp rift. Will this negatively affect the 40k universe though? The Primaris Marine development was more controversial lore-wise and tabletop-wise than this. In universe, you had Space Marines arguing and killing other Space Marines and even a Custodian in one instance because of how controversial the idea of a Primaris Marine was. The Custodians are even humans. They are more inhuman than Space Marines. Most of them are more like robots made out of flesh. If a young kid came up to them and asked a stupid question, they will not think twice about smoking that kid in public. This is an actual scene, by the way. It would be better to think of them as an entirely different species to humans. I would only see a problem if they were written like humans, with all our emotional flaws. Only we can betray the Emperor, they can't. The Custodians themselves used to be a bunch of half-naked dudes dressed in robes. If a change progresses the lore in a positive way, then that's a good thing. If the Custodians look like what they did in the OG days, then hell nah. That being said, however, I feel that the Custodians are already a fleshed out faction. Perhaps not the most fleshed out, as I would like to read more stories about the Dreadhost, but they are definitely fleshed out compared to their already existing female counterparts in the Talons of the Emperor that I'll touch on later. Instead of changing the lore, they should develop the lore, add to the lore using good storytelling, not edit out existing stuff. This pretty much sets a poor precedent, in my opinion. It may not be that surprising if Slaanesh is Gonzo the next day. Slaanesh never existed in the first place. Maybe the Custodes will eventually end up looking like a cheap 40k version of the Stormcast Eternals. It's also important to note, given what's happened to other fandoms like The Witcher with their Netflix series, that people appreciate being shown at least a modicum of respect to the years and years of world building that has built what we know as 40k today. Look at how the creators of the Fallout show treated the source material with genuine respect. Massive difference in mentality right there. So some people were unhappy with what they perceived as a low level of effort for the reveal. Others thought that it broke already established foundations about the Custodes. That's understandable. People have standards, and there's nothing wrong with criticizing something you believe is below standard for a company with a killer roster of creative professionals. Or because 40k has fluid lore doesn't mean you should settle for something that's objectively inferior to the standard of storytelling set by the Horus Heresy books. You could do anything if the storytelling is there, like a tentacle monster assassin for example, which actually existed before it got smoked by Captain Lysander. Inconsistency does happen more than you think in 40k though. Every real Black Library reader knows about the named character rule. It doesn't matter if that's a normal regular human going up against a space marine in melee combat. If that human has a name, then they have a chance of coming out on top. But it was the response from the official Warhammer Twitter account that really triggered all this controversy. Instead of just being straight up, they put up a tweet that pretty much started a social media storm which has led everyone to pivot from the actual lore to the agenda behind the decision in the first place. It was a bigger fumble than the Emperor not sending the Warhounds down to help Angron out. The social media mismanagement made the change feel like it was done because certain boxes needed to be checked. GW can drop PRLs that cause fans to meme them as the 5th Chaos God. Or 6th if you count Malice. Just look at what happened to Sodaz. I'm just hoping Astartes 2 is going to be a thing one day. When it comes to lore development though, at least in regards to the content Black Library writers produce, the books and audiobooks tend to be absolute W's. It's not an exclusive male-only space either. There are a ton of great female protagonists that smoke heretic packs, for example Commissar 7 Rena Rain and Elizabeth Beacon. And speaking of developing the lore, there's a much better decision they could have made instead. So the Custodians are part of what's called the Talons of the Emperor, and they're only the one half of the Talons, the Emperor's right hand. The other half, the left hand, are the Sisters of Silence, whose warrior women are known as Null Maidens. There are already female Talons of the Emperor that exist. I've seen the big YouTubers mention the Sisters of Battle, but the Space Battle Nuns aren't exactly a good comparison to the Custodes. It would be better to compare them to the Space Marines instead, who are more like Space Warrior Monks. Now, the lore for the Sisters of Silence. The material that's out there, at least in the Black Library, is absolutely lacking. I've only read about them in the Watchers of the Throne, Master of Mankind, and the Siege of Terra books. Plus that one Black Ship short story I forgot the name of. And they need more love because honestly they are OP as F. I'm gonna glaze up the Sisters of Silence now because they're actually busted. These women can solo Space Marines. The Soulless Queen is a great example. They can go toe to toe with demons and the Custodes rely on them to deal with deadly psychos as seen in the Almighty Lady audiobook when Centurion Longinus and the Custodes backed off in a fight with a powerful psycho who had pretty much blown up an entire ecclesiarchy megachurch to let the Nomadians handle it. The most impressive thing about these warrior women is that they aren't 8 foot or 10 foot tall giants. The only abnormal thing about them is the lack of a soul. Everything else is pure training and skill. So when you see a Space Marine lose to a Sister of Silence in a duel, that's a skill issue right there. And those that take the vow of silence will literally say nothing. Getting shot or hurt cannot make a sound come out from their mouths. For some of them it's physically impossible because they got their mouths surgically screwed shut. Not even the Kakarodons do that. For some reason though, like I said before, their lore is severely lacking. Sisters of Battle definitely get a lot more attention than they do. I think there's a couple possible reasons why GW chose to pursue the female custodian angle instead of developing the Null Maidens. Either they thought or were persuaded that a female custodian is a better idea to pursue than a Sister of Silence, or the decision makers did not like the Sisters of Silence at all. People probably thought a bunch of aggressive social outcasts who speak in sign language wouldn't appeal as much as a golden girl. Are we going to get a male sister next? Because technically male pariahs are possible and they do exist in the books, so surely it should be introduced next, right? So I don't have a problem with the idea of a female custodian. It's clearly a possibility that can be achieved with creativity and respect shown to the fact that the Custodes has historically been a brotherhood. But I do have a problem with the decision making and the delivery. Like Asmongold said, you can't say or do stuff like that to a community that is particularly passionate about the small details. Unless you have no issue with losing money, that is. Build upon the years of established writing and stories as a foundation. If you respect the history of 40k, the community's gonna love you, just like how they were faithful to the source material in the Fallout TV show. GW can either go the Fallout direction or the Witcher direction. On a more optimistic note, as a librarian of the Black Library, I know 40k lore can be inconsistent. And I'm not saying it should be inconsistent, but there have been inconsistencies in the past. So like every sane fan out there, I've got my own established headcanon. You shouldn't swallow every piece of content that's published, because 40k is the creation of a collective, not a singular authority. There's a reason why homebrew Space Marine chapters exist. Stuff like certain events in the War of the Beast aren't canon in my version of the lore. Nor that time when a World Eater literally punched his bare fist through the armored chest of a custodian. Hell nah. That is why 40k ain't gonna die anytime soon. The Emperor could become the Empress tomorrow, and I'll still be saying for the Emperor.